we've decided that a great way to go with this kind of new year, even though it feels like we're into it already, but we're just barely into it. It's spring, and we want to spring into spring with a word of the month. And so the reason we're choosing to focus on a word is because it has a different meaning for every person. So instead of setting a goal like, oh, I'm going to lose 10 pounds this month, which probably you may or may not accomplish if you're me anyway, how about we talk about something that could have a different meaning in your life at the stage and point you're in, and you could just do one thing to try and develop inside of that word. And so the word that we've chosen that we're going to talk about today is fearlessness. So you can interpret that word however, you interpret fearlessness and wherever you're at in your life, and can think about, how could I develop more fearlessness this month? And we're going to ask you to, tell us how it goes. Like, did you try something that you had never tried before that you've wanted to do? And then tell us about how that experience was, how you practiced being fearless. Because all of these words that we're going to introduce, one a month, just one a month, do one thing, don't overwhelm anybody. They're all words that you have to practice. You have to practice. You want to, you want to play the piano, you have to practice. You want to be a good football player, you have to go to practice. You want to dance, you have to practice. You want to learn another language, you got to practice. It's all about a practice to develop something and to be stronger in something or better at something. And so instead of just trying to meet a goal and then feeling bad about yourself when you don't meet that goal, we're going to practice this month fearlessness. And another definition of fearlessness comes from Psychology Today. And they say cultivating fearlessness doesn't imply that we eliminate all fear from our lives. Instead, it involves shifting our relationship with fear and learning to navigate it more effectively. As I have thought a lot about cultivating fearlessness and what that means to me, it doesn't imply, in my opinion, that we eliminate all fear from our life, because that is impossible. You can't eliminate fear. I read a book a long time ago, and it was one of the best things that I'd ever read. It was called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And so I remember reading through that book and thinking, oh, I'm still going to feel the fear, but I'm going to do it anyway. I loved the title of the book. I loved the message of it. And it did shift something in my own brain that said, I want to be more fearless. I want to have fear not define or stop me, but have it be something that I walk through. And so it's a shift. We can't eliminate all fear from our lives, but we can shift. We can shift, our relationship with fear. And so that's what I wanted to kind of talk about, like learning to navigate through fear, just more effectively. Now, Taylor Swift, I just love her. And I don't know what all the controversy's about. I just think she's awesome. And I think she's this self-made person who wrote songs and did her passion. And I'm just really happy for her and all of her success. And I think people have a fear of other people's success. I think that they fear that if this person is successful, I won't be. There won't be room for me. And that isn't true. I just believe things can expand and include so many people, which is why I'm a collaborator and always have been, because I believe that you put all the greatest people around you together and you come up with something even better. So she has this a couple of quotes that I just really like. And she said, one thing she said is that, I think fearless is having fears, but jumping anyway. Isn't that a great idea? You jump anyway. You have fears. So being fearless doesn't mean you have no fears. It means you're strong enough to face them. And that's Taylor Swift. That's what she said. One more time. Being fearless doesn't mean you have no fears. It means you're strong enough to face them. So the practice of being fearless is to step out, to jump off, to go forward, to try and dig through that piece of um, the relationship that you're in, that you either need it to work or you need to walk away. So when you're strong enough to face what you're afraid of, because always want, um, you don't want the uncomfortableness of that feeling, you just avoid it. So instead of avoiding, try to do one thing this month that makes you more fearless. Look at a fear that you have that you've been going to try and, overcome or go through or face a person and talk to them about something. And you just decide, I am strong enough to go forward. I find that songs often are the things that help me kind of pump myself up to be able to do something or to face something or to get through something. And maybe that's how your fearlessness is going to be developed this month. You're going to, when you start to feel like you're not going to get through something, I often will turn on a song, and the right song on the right day, in the right moment when I'm feeling either discouraged, depressed, or afraid of what I need to do next, can often just bring me out of it. So anyway, something you might want to try. Brene Brown, another person that I really admire, everything that she, has brought to us in vulnerability. She also has a great quote about courage, which I also think is fearless. She says, "Courage starts with showing up and letting ourselves be seen." Whew, that's vulnerable. Showing up and letting ourselves be seen. How often are you hiding? What are you hiding behind, or what are you afraid of that makes you hide? Courage starts with showing up and letting ourselves be seen. It's being vulnerable. Again, to be fearless is to be vulnerable. So when we think of the words courage and fearlessness and all of that, we think of, I don't know, marching in an army or something, which obviously takes great courage. I'm not putting that down, but in our everyday lives, as just getting through today, there are things that are hard to face because it means we have to show up. We have to face ourselves and let someone else see us, and see the problem as it really is and see our inadequacies, or, maybe it's something that we need to apologize for. That takes courage. To go and be fearless like that takes courage. Oh, here's another great quote. Okay. So Maya Angelou said, "Hope and fear cannot occupy the same space. Invite one to stay." So which one would you like to invite to stay? Because they don't live in the same space. So when there's hope, it basically, you invite hope into your life, you drown out, fear has to leave. So the moment you get into hope, which is what that music sometimes does for me, it gets me into hope. It gets me into a place where I'm like, I can face this, I can do it, I have hope. Then fear does not occupy the same space. I like that too. Invite one of them to stay, and I'm going to invite hope every time. Okay, so in my own life, cultivating fearlessness, I think that my relationship with fear really began. I mean, I remember one time when my dad was mad at me. Seriously, like one time. My dad had such a good nature, and my mother was so even tempered. I mean, we never heard mom yell, or they never fought in front of us, or I don't think they fought. They just discussed and talked through things. They were talkers, and they listened to us as little girls. And I only remember one time my dad kind of briskly walking down the hallway, and his eyes were those big blue eyes were popping out of his head, and I knew I'd done something, and being afraid for that moment with my dad. And there was no corporal punishment at all in my house. My parents would never have spanked us or done anything like that, which I don't believe that is effective way to raise children. I think it just confuses them. Like, I thought you loved me. This doesn't feel right. So that's my thing. Um, we're having a big case here in St. George with a woman that is, famous, one of those, influencer people I won't mention, that a lot of abuse, and a lot of followers that, well, this is what I do with my kids if they run through the house and I don't want them to run through the house. And I know somebody that actually did this. They would have their kids, they'd make them get on the floor and like army crawl across the same space where they just ran in the house. And just, to me, just abusive, stuff. And yet tons of people were following this woman. And I just think about for me in my life, there was that one time I remember with my dad, and I knew he was upset, and then he sat me down and talked to me because that's how we handled things in my house, which I'm so grateful for. And then I remember one other time when we were having a sleepover at our house, and Caroline, me, Karen, Susan, we were all downstairs, and it was on a holiday weekend, and my dad had to get up early, go to the flower shop, to start at 5 a.m. to make sure all the flowers, I don't know if it was Mother's Day weekend or if it was Easter, or I don't remember what it was, but we were having, you know, this sleepover, and we would not be quiet. And Mom kept coming to the top of the stairs, and she'd kind of walk partway down the stairs and go, girls, we can still hear you. We're trying to sleep. Your dad has to get up so early. Please be quiet, kind of thing. She'd done this 3 or 4 times. It's now like, I don't know, 3 or 4 in the morning. And we're still, we're having our sleepover. And this is pre Birchtold, pre-kidnapping, pre all that. This is before that happened. So I'm probably, I don't know, 10 or 11. And anyway, all of a sudden from the top of the stairs, my even-tempered, never raises her voice, makes 3 different breakfasts so that each of her daughters can have what they want for breakfast before school. That's my mom. She is just this even-tempered person, and she just is like that. And we hear her yell for the first time. I seriously don't think I'd ever heard my mom yell. And she yells down the stairs, Grace, you have got to be quiet and go to sleep. And then she said, damn it. Oh my gosh. All of us stopped what we were doing, and we didn't even see her face. She just said a swear word at the end of yelling down the stairs. And we all looked at each other, including Caroline, and we all started crying just because it was so like, this was like, we felt so bad, and it was so like scary, and it was so out of context. And I look back on those 2 things. Those are the only 2 things that I ever remember feeling afraid or in my home prior to being kidnapped. Then I knew what fear was. Waking up to the voices in the motorhome, it was like catatonic response in my body, like freezing to a point of where every muscle is so tight and every single word is so, where's it coming from? Who are they? Why do they want me? What's happening? Because all the grooming had already been done. We'd seen lots of, it's the 70s, it's the race to space, everything from our favorite hamburger joint called the home of the space burger to every, Planet of the Apes and movies and stuff. It was all there. And he had made sure that we all, that he told UFO stories and all that stuff. So all that was already planted in my mind as this little, young 10, 11, now 12-year-old girl. And so when I woke up to those voices, I knew I'd been taken. And so it was like a fear that I'd never fully been able to express, like what happened in my body that day and in my mind, and the shift that happened from a world that was safe to a world of being in constant terror. I really, truly feel like that part of everything that happened to me had as much effect on my life and the aftermath as the abuse that I went through with that same horrible. There was terror and fear in that, and the body stiffens, and the mind, you try to go somewhere else. But in those moments before even the sexual assault began, it was like a terror and a feeling of fear that I had never experienced before. So when all of those things, continued on for those 4 years in my tweenhood life, and into my, until I was 16, and then even figuring out that it wasn't real, I had a very difficult time navigating my relationship with fear in any kind of effective way after I knew that they weren't real, because it was already in my body, and my brain had already been rewired in a way that, it was going to take something. And I I have a friend, she said, cultivating fearlessness doesn't imply, and I said this earlier, that we eliminate all fear from our lives. Instead, it involves shifting our relationship with fear and learning to navigate it more effectively. And that's exactly how she said it to me. And that has made a huge impact on my current life. Like just knowing that I am still cultivating the relationship I have with fear has allowed me to think about certain things that I'm afraid of. For example, I have a fear, even now, of picking up the phone or walking up to a person who I know wants to support, wonderful things in the world that are happening. But for me to ask them, like to donate, I have this fear of being rejected, of not being good enough, of not having what I'm doing worthy enough to have those financial funds. And I'm really working on that one because I know that not everybody has had, difficulties with money like I have throughout my life. It's been one of the elusive things in my life. Like somehow there's still a fear of being worthy, of having, a raise or having the right job or having it just be okay, that I make money. Like I've felt like I had to apologize to people about the fact that I was able to produce with Peacock and the wonderful writers and producers, a friend of the family, and I got paid for that. I have felt like, oh my gosh, people are going to think that I told my story for money. That's so terrible. And then I had another friend who, actually two of them that are, children of one of my very best friends. And they both said to me one day, there should be nothing in the way. I mean, you showed the world how to be vulnerable, tell their stories honestly so that you could change the world for millions of other children and you could end child abuse. You should be a multimillionaire, and I'm not. But I always feel like I have to apologize and there's a fear in that for me. So just being very vulnerable, that's something that I can open up and say to people now, which I would not have said, certainly not in a public forum like our podcast before. But it is a fear that I am working on currently in my life and how to cultivate fear of people misunderstanding me, of people not knowing my intentions. And I'm like, I can't make the whole world understand me or understand my intentions. Some people will and they'll get it and some people won't. And so I don't need to be always apologizing. That's a fear of mine. I guess there's a lot of general terms that I can use because I'm sure that there are many survivors who can relate to various kinds of fear. Some of my traumatic things that have made me live in fear that were early on was I was afraid to share my true, complete story. I was afraid to tell everything. I was very afraid to talk about the sexual, assault and abuse. And I couldn't say the words, I was raped, as a young girl, hundreds, many times. I couldn't say the words out loud. I couldn't talk about it in the way that I know other survivors are still in fear about talking plainly about what actually happened to them and finding that safe person to talk to, which is why, a therapist is often, a safe person because you have this idea that if people know this about me, that somehow they'll think differently of me. And that happens. I mean, people have family members who are like, why would you talk about that? Why would you tell about, what Uncle Henry did? Or why would you, put this stain on our family as if the person who was assaulted created what happened to them? And so there is this fear. So that for me, I think it's just sort of naturally there because you have so much guilt and shame. Even if somebody's telling you it's not your fault, you still carry around this thing until you actually practice letting go of your own guilt and shame. You have to let go of it and you have to replace it with something like hope, like fearlessness, like courage. Like that is replacing something that you have had with you by default almost. So, um, I guess my mind created like a scenario of maybe what would happen if I were to share all of my story. And because I wasn't believed or something in the past, or because it was so unbelievable what my story was, like worrying that people wouldn't believe me. And also because of all the threats, of course, that are made, like something's going to happen to my sister. She'll be kidnapped. My other sister, she'll be blinded. Your father will be removed, which meant killed. I had all these other very fearful threats that were in my mind. And even though I came to the point of knowing it wasn't true, that trigger of the mental and emotional state of being in fear was already deeply implanted in me. And I know that that's true of a lot of other survivors, and they might be in different ways, but it's still very much that kind of a feeling. So if you tell, this is going to happen, that is very fearful. I mean, that's very, very, if you tell on what's going on with you, then I'm going to do this and that. And that fear for me, of course, kept me from doing some of the things that I'm passionate about, because I was afraid of not being accepted. I was afraid of rejection, which still comes up for me, like I just explained. And so when our body is in that state of fear, when we're being abused, the mind and the body together are triggered and it lives there. So anything, to have something remind us of that time, or even if it doesn't feel like it's a direct reminder, there's just things that have to be kind of dealt with and released in the mind and the body in order for courage and hope and walking through fear and becoming more fearless can happen. For me, fearlessness is, now telling my story totally, authentically, raw, true words, not hiding anything. Also, fearlessness for me is taking on, the jobs that I have basically created for myself. I took on a job, to be the executive director of a community theater company. I'd never done that exactly before, but I knew what the arts meant, and I knew how to direct and produce and make it happen. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to take that job and I'm going to learn and I'm going to figure it out. Many times, I think when we are doing something new and that fear steps in and we're almost afraid to step out into the dark because we're not 100% sure if we can be successful, you feel the fear and you do it anyway. You take that first step. And when I took that job and then another job as an executive director at another theater company years later, again, it was brand new. That theater company was brand new. And it was a performing arts center. And so trying to figure out how to, collect, a variety of arts and entertainment and educational things that their mission statement had in it. It was new. It was a new thing for me, and I was creating something newly, and it was exciting, but it was also scary. But I did them. I did those jobs, and I did a good job. And being able to see myself doing a good job and telling myself, good job, Jan, that was a good job. Good for you. You picked up the phone and made that call. You actually did go to that business and say, would you like to support the arts here in our community? This is what we're doing. And I learned how to do it. It was good. Um, and I walked through the fear. So I think making that choice that even when you're still frightened or scared, but you're doing it anyway, it comes with practice. And the more that I put myself out there, the more comfortable I will get with that thing that I was scared of until it is no longer scary. There have been many things in my life. I used to walk around my car, well into my 20s, from the time I was driving at age 15 to, probably until about age 30. I would literally open the door of the car and then I would look, in the back seat, on the floor. And then I would look under my car before I would get in my car and drive my car. And I knew there weren't aliens. I knew that nobody was really watching me, but that fear of just something coming out of the shadows or the back seat, it was there. It was just there. And so I had to work on things like that as well to overcome those things. I don't do that anymore, but I learned how. I learned how to tell myself, you're going to get in the car and you're not going to look under the car in the back seat. This time, you're in a grocery store, you're coming out to the lot, you have your groceries, you're going to put them in the trunk where you do, and you're going to look around and see that everybody else is doing the same thing. They're going into the grocery store, they're bringing their groceries out, they're putting them in the trunk or the back seat. And guess what? You're safe. Don't do those two things. Don't look in the back seat or under the car. Just get in and drive. And I have to kind of breathe through it. And that's what I would do. And I would practice. I practiced. Something so simple to someone else was very hard for me. So the more comfortable I got with it, now I'm so comfortable. I'm not scared all the time. And I don't do that unless my car was parked maybe in a sketchy place. And now I want to look under, under the car and in the back seat for a reason, not for no reason. So again, it's not the absence of fear. It is always going to be there, but we are going to jump anyway. We're going to follow a little advice from Taylor Swift and Brene Brown, and we're going to and Maya Angelou as well, and we're gonna develop courage and fearlessness. So I think that fear for me was always the voice of my perpetrator, or his voice coming through the voice of the aliens, because that was him too. And I look back, and so oftentimes I can catch myself going, oh, I'm hearing a voice in my head or in my heart or in my mind that isn't real. I can literally like identify it now most of the time. And those things, they create fear that doesn't belong in your life now. Your life has changed. And that when I listened to and read the book, The Power of Now, it really helped me. And I've just reviewed that book several times and found the old CDs that I had. And I've got them in my car currently, and I'll start my car and, oh, they come on. They just come on. And it reminds me to look at what's happening right now. Like in this second, in this moment, is there something to be afraid of in this moment? Is worry and being afraid of something in the future productive? Is worry and being afraid of something in the past productive for your life right now? And are some of those fears and worries based on past experiences that you're projecting might happen in the future? And is that likely? And then you can say to yourself, no, actually, I don't need to be afraid of this job interview. I might be a little bit nervous. I might be like when I was doing new things at my new job of starting a performing arts center that wanted, this huge diversity of arts and entertainment. I know a lot about stage plays and musicals and that kind of theater and that kind of art. But what about the artists who paint paintings? And what about, people who do light shows? And what about people out there in the world that, are concert pianists, and we should maybe get that person and pair them with some of our brilliant musicians in town? And what about, my brain is like this, but do I have the courage to make the call to reach out? And when I did, it almost always turned out positively. And I had all these amazing artists that would come from other places, and the arts and sciences, we had lectures that were amazing. And so those were new things for me, but I knew that whatever fear I had in picking up the phone or reaching out or will they reject me, I would do it anyway. And sometimes it got rejected. It didn't always work, but most of the time it did. It actually did, which also gave me more confidence. So we don't have to live in constant fear as adults. We do have a choice in how we mitigate our fear and our past, what we do with it. So I just want to maybe throw out a few things that would be fearless and maybe something that you might think about doing. One would be to file a report against your predator, your perpetrator, to actually file a report. Even if you don't do anything else, their name would sit in a file. And maybe when some other child, this can be like you're an adult now and this happened when you were 10. You file a report, you put a name, you say what happened to you. And that person's name, what if it comes up again and there's another 10-year-old? Maybe this happened to you 20 years ago, but this same name comes up. Now somebody else knows that this happened somewhere else. That gives them a better case with that new 10-year-old, because my guy, he perpetrated on young girls, that 9 to 12-year-old age is when it would start. And sometimes it would carry on even until those girls were, one was as old as 18 when it finally stopped. So I know those stories of others that if I had done that, if I had known to do that and had the courage to do it, maybe I could have stopped it. Maybe I could have prevented that. And I don't blame myself. I knew what I knew, and that's all you can do. That's why I'm trying to raise some awareness here so that you do better than I did, But that would be something courageous to file a report against your perpetrator. And maybe also, as as you there are some, family get-togethers and activities that are coming up in March and into April. Um, everything from St. Patrick's Day to Easter to, Palm Sundays and various people and groups are celebrating different things. What if you didn't follow um, your family, even if they would be upset? Like, what if you were to do what you do and to be transparent, even if your family would get upset? What if you were to talk about what happened to you to someone that might be safe in your family, but others would get upset and you did it anyway? That might be something. Just doing what's right for you and standing up for yourself and being who you are. Maybe that conversation hasn't happened yet with your family or friends, but there's a fearlessness in being authentic and being able to talk about and to express, this is who I am. I had one conversation with my dad one time when I was probably, I was a young, um, I was doing another play, and I think it was my college years, and I might have been married. Um, and I don't remember what the situation was, but I remember telling my dad, I'm gonna be doing this play. I want you and mom to come and, see it and whatever. And he said something, and we were face to face. It was in person. It wasn't over the phone. And I remember him kind of having this reaction, sort of where he kind of made fun of me, and which was so like not like him. But he kind of went, "Oh, it's another play. Got to make sure you feel good because you got to get another play." You know, it was kind of this weird reaction to, "Oh, it's another play. Like maybe I should get a real job." Kind of like that sort of a tone, or like the the plays and all those things, musicals, the things that I love to do were some kind of a crutch for me to feel good. I don't know. Which, yes, they do make me feel good because that's what I love. That's my passion and still is. And I remember being brave enough and fearless enough, not being afraid of my dad, but calling him out. And I remember just saying, "You know what, Dad? If me doing plays and musicals and being an actress is somehow not okay with you on some level, which I don't understand because you've never reacted like that before, then I won't invite you. But I am going to be an actress. That's what I do. And that is what I do for fun and for pleasure and for enjoyment because I'm good at it and I love it." And immediately, because this is the father I had, he apologized immediately right then. Said, "Oh, Jenny, I'm sorry. That's not really what I meant. I don't know why I reacted like that. Of course, we'll come and see it. And of course, we love to watch you on stage. It's my proudest moments because you are so brilliant." I mean, he immediately did that. I'm so lucky I had that kind of dad, right? But it was a little fearless moment. And I remember I was kind of shaking because I really stood up for myself in a way that I never imagined I would have to or could. And it's certainly not with my dad, who supported me so much without there ever being anything in the way. And I still to this day don't really know, and I don't think he really knew why he reacted that way. But that was fearless of me. So standing up for what is right for you. Maybe it's time to get out of a bad relationship. And even if you don't know how, you're going to stand on your own, how you're going to support yourself or your child or children. I've been in that situation. But being fearless when you know it isn't right or it's not going to work, that it's detrimental maybe to you and maybe to the other person as well. There's some fearlessness that you'll have to walk through and find in order to, get out of that relationship and maybe having that conversation, that first conversation. And I've had one of those too, had several of those. And it takes some courage to make a decision that I got to talk to this person about it, and it's just not working. And I'm going to leave. And I've done that more than once, and it's hard. Maybe speaking up for some injustice, that you have seen, whether it's something in your family or your neighborhood, maybe your community in some way. When you speak up for some injustice, some people will be upset. There's a kind of a taking a side on that, and that's hard to do as well. But to speak up, maybe you can do that for one person. You can speak up for an injustice for them. Another thing you could maybe do is standing up to a friend or a partner who is not treating you right. It's not that you are ready to walk away, but to actually say, I need to have a conversation with you about something that's bothering me. It takes a lot of courage to do that. Just maybe find one of those, and then just speaking the truth, being fearless in what you say that comes from your truth. So anyway, those are some of my thoughts about the word of the month, which is fearlessness. So I'm going to just challenge you to be fearless. And we're going to put this out on social media that this is our word of the month, and that we want people to write in, to the show, to the podcast, and tell us your thoughts about being fearless. Tell us if you had an experience practicing this. And maybe if you write into our show, we'll share what you wrote if you want, if you're okay with that. We wouldn't say your name. You could tell us, please share my experience, or don't. But it might be a really cool way for us to communicate and for us to find different examples of people practicing being fearless. Anyway, that's our plan. The word of the month, fearlessness. Go out there and do it.